the streets and houses, rainbow climbing high. Everyone can see it smiling over the sky. Paint the whole world with a rainbow. 3, 4.
It's going to fall.
No, it isn't.
Hello. We're seeing how high we can build this tower before it falls over. Now, George has just built a tower with 6 bricks. It's Bungle's turn now.
I've just got to 5. Oh, don't do that, George. You'll make me laugh.
Sorry, Bungle.
What's going on?
Bungle's building a tower.
Oh, I can do that. I'm very good at building. I'll show you. Yeah.
Hey!
Zippy.
That was my tower.
Not 2, 1, 2.
Zippy, now come on. Now say you're sorry to Bungle. You knocked his tower over.
I didn't know.
Oh, yes, you did. I was building my tower and you just knocked it over on purpose. It's not fair.
Poor Bungle.
Yeah, but I want to build something. I mean, I'm very good at building.
Well, you can take your turn after Bungle.
You're greedy.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are. You always want to use the things other people are using.
That's not being greedy.
It is. It's greedy and it's selfish.
Look, me? Selfish? What's selfish?
You're selfish. You never share things. You always want to keep everything for yourself.
Yeah, I was only going to show you how to build a tower properly, that's all.
Zippy, you know you've got to share the bricks, don't you? There aren't enough of them to go round for you to build all at the same time. You've got to take your turn. Now, if you can't wait and take your turn, you must go and play with something else.
I want to play with the bricks.
Now, come on, Bungle. Let's see how high you can build your tower. Then Zippy can have a turn after you.
No, thank you. I'll find something else to do.
Oh, thank goodness he's gone. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I found something else to do, Geoffrey.
Good.
Yeah, I'm playing with this.
Well, don't wait, that's a bad, Zippy. You're going to cause an accident.
Guess what I'm being? I'm a fisherman.
Zippy!
Oh, look. It's fallen over again. Oh, you're not a very good builder, Bungle, are you?
It didn't fall over, Zippy. You pushed it over.
Oh, I'm fed up and cross, and I'm not playing anymore.
Oh, what's wrong with him?
What's wrong? You just made Bungle very unhappy. Now, go on, go and say you're sorry.
What for?
Because you made him feel unhappy.
It is not very nice being unhappy, Zippy. You don't like it when you're unhappy.
Yeah, wasn't my fault. It was that silly spoon.
Well, I'll go and see if he's all right.
Well, I didn't do it on purpose.
Yes, you did.
Now the tower got in the way of the spoon. I mean, Bungle shouldn't have put it there. No. Anyway, now he's gone, and it's my turn, right? 1, 2, 2, 3. How high did Bungle get?
I nearly got to 6.
Oh, anybody can build 6, Bungle.
Well, I don't care. I'm doing something else now.
What? Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, let's have a story. Yeah, I'll pick one.
Give it back, Zippy. I'm
You've
picking
got to
a
stop the
story.
pair of you. You're going to tear the book to pieces.
It's Zippy. I was looking for a story, and he said he wanted to.
Yeah, well, I'm good at choosing stories, that's why.
Well, so am I.
Yeah, not as good as me.
Oh, dear, we are having a lot of trouble today, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
And whose fault is it, Zippy?
Well, it's certainly not my fault.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't.
It is.
I'm going.
Oh, Zippy's not being very nice today, is he?
He certainly isn't.
He's never very nice.
I'm always nice.
No, you're not.
I shall go away and not come back.
Good.
Ha!
Zippy, you can put this spoon back where you found it.
Oh, perhaps he isn't feeling very well.
There's nothing wrong with me, George.
And there's nothing wrong with me.
No, me.
Oh, Geoffrey, Shall we quickly have a story while Zippy's away?
I don't think Zippy will be very long somehow. No, I think we ought to wait until he comes back.
Well, it will serve him right if he misses a story.
Well, now who's not being very nice?
But it will serve him right, Geoffrey. He's been horrible.
Oh, all right then. But I still think we ought to tell him about the story, don't you? And then if he doesn't come back, it's his own fault.
Well, I did just tell him. Well, I did, sort of.
Welcome, Ronnie. Nice to talk to you again.
Oh, absolute pleasure to talk to you, Sean. Lovely.
And welcome, Zippy, in the background there.
Yes, he's there. Yeah, he's not moving his mouth. He's a bit shy on a podcast.
Well, you've had a very long and successful career as a puppeteer, Ronnie. But where did your fascination with puppets all start from? Where did it all stem from?
Ah, right. Well, it started way back when I was very young. I was given some puppets by my father, sort of glove puppets. And we lived, my background is I basically was born in Canada, but we all came over as a family, my sister, my mum and dad, from Canada to England. And we ended up in a London council flat in South London. Anyway, we're all living there quite happily. And one Christmas, I think it was a Christmas, Dad gave me a set of puppets, which was about 4 or 5, I can't remember, little glove puppets. And I sort of started to do a show then. I quite enjoyed doing all the different characters. I mean, he made me a sort of proscenium arch stage so I could hide and do the puppets underneath. And then school holidays started and I thought, it's a bit boring. What can we do? And kids kept round saying, should we go out to the bomb sites? Because there were bomb sites around in those days, believe it or not, still. Anyway, I said, well, actually, I've got some puppets. Why didn't I give you a puppet show? Anyway, they thought, oh, that's quite a good idea. It's different. Anyway, basically, the kids sat on the stairs of we were on the first floor, stairs going up to the second, third, fourth floor. And it was like a raked auditorium, if you know what I mean. They could sort of see. And I had set my puppets out in this sort of hallway there and did shows. I mean, I also had some Pelham puppets. They're the ones that used to buy from stores. Sadly, Bob Pelham died a few years ago now, and the company's sort of more or less defunct. But the puppets themselves have become collector's items nowadays. Anyway, I had about 3 of those, and I had a wind-up gramophone, and I put on records. I was given this collection of 78s, and there were things like Gracie Fields singing, songs, Victor Sylvester music. I mean, I had no choice. I just played all this stuff and danced puppets around to it. So that was my sort of beginnings. And then I moved on when I was a little bit older. I found that there was a company called Pollock's Toy Theatres, and they're basically little model theatres. And they were very popular sort of just after the sort of First World War, sort of Second World War, that sort of time, and even before, I think. And they were literally model theatres of shows that existed in the main theatres. So shows that may have appeared at Drury Lane Theatre, Covent Garden, all those sort of things. And there was a few plays I bought, and I discovered this little theatre or this place, which was called the Pollock's Toy Museum. And it was, in those days, it was in Monmouth Street near sort of Leicester Square. And there's an amazing museum. It had lovely model theatres and different sorts of puppets and all, or when I say sorts of puppets, but different toys and all sorts of stuff. And downstairs, there was a man setting up an exhibition of puppets, and they looked like trick figures. They were marionettes. And I talked to him a bit, and his name was Tom Howard, bless him. And he was the archivist of the British Puppet and Model Theatre Guild. Now, I never even heard of this organisation. I mean, I was still at school. But anyway, he said, well, why don't you come along? We've got meetings at St Gabriel's Hall, which is basically in Vauxhall. And I thought, oh, Vauxhall, that's not far from where I live, because I lived in South London, Stockwell. Anyway, so I asked my mum if I could go for an evening. I think it was 7 till 9 or something on a Tuesday. Anyway, I went along there and I met a whole load of puppeteers. I describe in my book, which I shall show you there. Take it away again. I'm very naughty. About they're all sort of old men with white beards and things. I mean, I, being a young kid, I thought, oh, they're very interesting. I mean, they had their wives with them and maybe girlfriends or whatever. But I thought, well, they're very interesting, and they did marionettes and they did some gloves and shadow puppets and stuff. And then somebody presented every Tuesday evening a show of sorts or a talk or something like that. Anyway, I was quite interested to hear about all these different puppeteers and the fact that there were professional puppeteers around. I really even didn't know about that. Anyway, it sparked an idea in my head anyway. And to make a long story short, I was taken by one of the guild members who'd come all the way from Australia to a puppet theatre that had opened in 1961. And I went along about 1963, something like that, very young. And she took me there to this, and it's called the Little Angel Theatre. And I literally fell in love with the building and the place because it did a wonderful marionette show. The one I saw was The Little Mermaid and a Hans Andersen story. And oh my goodness, it was just beautifully produced. The music, the puppets were all carved marionettes, absolutely beautiful. And I thought, right. And I sort of went along. I asked if I could sort of volunteer for a bit. So I think it was a weekends shows. That was the only time I was free anyway, because I was still at school. And I went along and I showed people to their seats and got to know people vaguely, the company a bit. And eventually I got a bit of, I think it was, said to myself, I'm going to write to John Wright, who was the founder director of the theatre, who's around, a very busy man. And asked if he ever took apprentices on or anything like that. Yeah, anyway, I got a wonderful letter back from him saying, yes, I remember your visit to the theatre. Yes, we do occasionally have apprenticeships, and we'd be interested. Come along and talk to us. So I thought, oh my goodness. So I went along, and I was coming up I was about 15. Yes, I was. I've been 15. Yes, I was. I was 15. And I went along, and he said, well, we're very happy to take you on, but there is one thing: we can't afford to pay you. And I thought, oh, that's not going to be very good. Anyway, I went back to my mum and dad, and I said, I had a great meeting. I love the theatre. I've told you all about it anyway from my previous visits. But anyway, my father, being a teacher, said, well, so what are they going to pay you for your, And I went, oh, they're not going to pay me. I mean, I'm just going to learn everything. And, for services rendered, I'll get all this wonderful tuition. Anyway, my father said, Edna, Mum, go into the kitchen. They went in the kitchen and they discussed my future life. Anyway, I thought it was about half an hour. I was sitting there thinking, oh, my goodness, what's going to happen to me? But anyway, they came up. Mum had a twinkle in her eye. And basically they said, yes, you can join the Little Angel Theatre. We'll give you 3 months to see whether you really like it or not. And then 3 months for the company to see whether they like you or not, is probably more to the point. Anyway, I joined the company and it was absolutely wonderful. Now, I've got some pictures. This is me aged 15. Can you see that? I don't know. On the picture, there was John Wright at the top there. He's the boss man. And there was Lindy, his wife, down below. And there's Christopher Leith, Joyce Wren, and Mary Kenny, and myself in the middle there. And that was me aged 15. Yeah. And there's me aged 15 behind backstage. Now, you're probably wondering, what's he got in his mouth, or he's sucking on something? Anyway, it's a rubber tube. Right. And I had to have, can you believe at that tender age, I had to have a cigarette, and I lit it back there, and I blew down this rubber tube, which then the whole stage was there, and there was basically a cauldron, a witch's cauldron, and I blew the smoke for the witch's cauldron when she was doing spells and things like that. So that's the idea, and there's another picture of me aged 15 or whatever. Looked about 12, but here we are. There's some more there. I don't know if you can see that. That's me up on the original puppet bridge, holding up the Prince puppet. And then there's John Wright, myself. Sorry, it's a bit blurry, this one. Lindy and myself holding, that was Rapunzel, one of the other shows we did. And so there he was. So I had sort of 8 months full-time work at the theatre. I've got one more photograph. Just show you that one, because that shows the original proscenium. It was like a letterbox opening, and we were all there. There's some puppets behind there. Sorry, it is a bit blurry from the book. But anyway, I had an absolute joy working there. I mean, I'd left school. You could leave school at 15. My father wanted me to stay on and take exams and stuff. But because I absolutely fallen in love with the theatre, and they had decided, all right, well, let you do apprenticeship, I was able to leave school. At that time, you could in those days. We're talking about 199,000 years ago. But anyway, I joined them, and I was with the company for 8 months, earning, well, I think I earned eventually £2 a week. Well, it was quite a lot of money in those days, and I was a bit naughty. I used to sort of, I was still living at home, so I used to cheat on the tube fares. Sorry, this is very naughty. But I used to say, one from Old Street, please, which is one stop away from the Angel, which is where the tube station was nearest to the theatre in those days. And anyway, I did things like that. I had the cheapest lunches. I mean, anyway, but I had a most wonderful time. And believe it or not, after all these years, I'm now an honorary associate of the Little Angel Theatre. I performed there last year in a season. I teach at the theatre now. The theatre's totally changed. Sadly, John Wright died in 1991. His wife is still around, Lindy, who's wonderful. We're great friends. We're both honorary associates of the theatre, actually. And the theatre is run by a whole lot of different people now, but it's still there. The building's there, still very active. And as I say, I perform and I teach. And so it's very close to my heart. Yeah. So that's my beginnings. And then from there, I went on to work with another company called the Hogarth Puppets, who were famous for a puppet called Muffin the Mule on television. He was like the first iconic television puppet. He started way back in 1946 and carried on television. This is the old black and white days, just BBC, from Alexandra Palace and Lime Grove Studios. Anyway, and the Muffin was there till 1955 on the BBC TV. Sadly, the lady that used to play the piano, she was John Mills, the famous actor's sister, Annette Mills, and sadly she passed away suddenly. So the BBC thought, oh, we haven't got Annette Mills, we can't have Muffin either. But in fact, Muffin continued for a short time on ITV, because ITV sort of opened in 1955, and they did a few sort of programs with Muffin in then. But then he carried on in the theatre, and so there was sort of shows. And one of the things in the 60s that the Hogarth Puppets did, that they had a travelling caravan show, and I travelled around with them. That's the caravan there. That's the Hogarth Puppets, and me holding up a dragon puppet. And there's me with Muffin, still quite young. But it was wonderful to work with them as well. And, and my career really carried on. I worked with various other companies over the time, and eventually started in television and film, but that was a bit later on. So I had about at least 10 years of working with various companies and other puppet shows before television and film sort of came along. Although I must admit, we did do a couple of televisions from the Little Angel Theatre, but I was very much in the background. I was just watching, or they came and filmed at the theatre or something like that. I think we did go to Birmingham and do a show, and I was able just to hold a puppet on the stage or something like that. But so I had vaguely seen some television stuff. Of course, as a kid, I used to watch lots of telly, at home. I mean, we had a little old black and white set, and we watched things like, Sooty and Sweep. We watched Jerry Anderson shows, all the wonderful early ones, really. I mean, we watched Twizzle and Torchy and Fireball XL5 and Supercar and all those wonderful shows. So, I mean, they're all great influences on, I thought, oh, this is very exciting. Never did I think that I would be working a puppet that became incredibly iconic, but that's just how these things happen, I suppose. One's life, you can't forecast your own sort of life, really, and it just happened. But anyway, that's a rough, brief history of my beginnings.
Yeah, it's funny actually because when I was growing up, obviously I was watching Rainbow and Zippy and George and things. I
Mm.
gravitated towards George more than the others for some reason, and also Hartley Hare
Oh,
was
yeah.
another really sarcastic puppet character. I don't know if that says anything about my personality, but I always
And mine, I suppose. But no, I think actually it's interesting you mentioned Hartley Hare. Um, I used to go to another puppet organisation too when I was a kid, and one of the people that went to visit that was eventually actor, puppeteer, producer, all sorts of. He's done amazing things. A guy called Nigel Plaskett, who was actually the voice and operator of Hartley Hare. So, and we became mates, and we're still mates now, which is lovely. So we've known each other all our working lives, and we were kids, and we did sort of shows together. He lived in North London, sort of Hampstead area, and I lived in South. But I used to go on the tube across and do shows with his puppets and stuff like that. So yeah, and we still meet up from time to time and gossip about what we've been up to and stuff like that. So yeah, no, Hartley was an amazing character, wasn't he? He was, this loudmouth, cheeky character. And then Zippy, of course, was a know-all and just, basically knew everything and talked and talked and talked and interrupted everybody. Didn't let anybody speak. Mind you, I think I'm a little bit like that. I don't let you have much say, do I? Anyway, over to you.
Well, how did you get the job on Rainbow?
Right. Well, that was, again, an amazing fluke, really. The original puppeteer was a lady called Violet Philpott, lovely name. And she was a glove puppet mentor of mine. And one of the puppets that she helped me with, and I've got one here just to show you, this is the dodo bird. And she helped me make this puppet. And he was one of the characters in my very first glove puppet show I did. And she was the one who sort of mentored me and saying, Ronnie, I think you should do your own shows and we can help you build the stage and I'll help you make the puppets. And so I'm the Dodo Bird, and I'm very much honoured to be on your podcast. Thank you, Sean, for inviting me. Thank you, Dodo, very much. Anyway, that was that. So Violet was the first puppeteer of Zippy. And then, sadly, when she was working on the programme, this was only on the first series, really, she did something to her back, one of her discs or something. I think it was because she was in a quite awkward position. And when you do television in those days, you didn't sort of say, oh, I have to be a bit more comfortable. I can't work with, you might get your job, they might get somebody else in. And because, us puppeteers don't earn millions of bucks, suddenly, you're earning quite a nice wage on television. So she, obviously, I think she felt too that she didn't want to sort of upset the apple cart, as it were. And so, but her back was she was so disabled that she had to lie flat on her back to get the discs sort of sorted. And it meant that, in the end, she couldn't continue doing the studio work. So another puppeteer who happened to be a friend of mine who I'd met before the Little Angel, actually, we were on tour. His name is John Thurtle. And he took over from Violet doing the Zippy character. We didn't voice the puppets then. The original voice man was a wonderful man called Peter Hawkins. Now, he's very famous for playing Daleks, but also in the early days when I was watching television, he did the voices of Bill and Ben. He did Captain Pugwash. He did so much stuff. He was like the uncrowned king of voice work for television, really. A wonderful character actor. Anyway, he did the first series. And then after that, a wonderful actor called Roy Skelton took over, and he basically did the voice of Zippy and took over from Peter. And I'm just looking up and show you a picture. There's Roy there in his what we call Roy's hole. It was basically in the studio next to the set, and we could hear him live, and we lip synced to his voices, which was Zippy and George as well. Yes. Anyway, so that was, and so I was very lucky. I didn't originally do when I say lucky, it was a bit odd as a puppeteer. You always do the voice to your puppet, but it didn't matter too much. I learned to sort of lip sync to somebody else's voice. which was a bit unusual in those days. But funny enough, when I worked at the Little Angel as a very young puppeteer, we used to have recordings. It was done on tape in those days, the voices were, and so we just mimed to the voices there. So I was sort of used to that a little bit. Anyway, to make a long story short, John phoned me up. He did the series for a while, did I think the second series. And then by the end of that, him and his partner, Ian Allen, had been involved in their own company called Playboard Puppets. And they'd been doing shows all around the country, as well as John doing his bits of telly and stuff. And it turned out that John was a brilliant businessman, and he sold the idea of one of their shows called Button Moon to Thames Telly. And so the producer thought, yes, it's quite interesting. Well, I'm sure we can do something. And they said, yes, we'll do a series of it and see how it goes. Yeah. Anyway, I think they ended up doing about 90 programs, Button Moon. But so he couldn't carry on working Zippy because it was about 24 weeks a year doing Rainbow when it first started. It was quite a long time on the program. Anyway, so he phoned me up and said, look, Ronnie, I can't carry on doing Zippy. Look, would you like to take over? I'm sure you'll be brilliant. And come along and we'll have a meeting with the producer and blah, blah, blah. And I've already given you a good boost up, to the producer, but come and meet everybody. So I went along for lunch. And they were still recording. John was doing Zippy, and a wonderful puppeteer called Valerie Heberden was doing George. And there was Roy there doing the voices, and Geoffrey was there. Stanley Bates was Bungle Bear, and the singers were actually different then. They were Carl, Julian, and I always forget this terrible, Carl, Julian, and Charlie Dore. And they were not the very original singers on Rainbow. There was quite a few cast changes early days. But they were more folksy in a way to what the Jane Rod and Freddie turned out to be eventually, that people always remember. But anyway, they were lovely, and I had a meeting with Pamela Lonsdale, who was the producer, and she said, yes, I think it might be all right. So I said, well, you can give me a chance. I'd love to do it. I am free. I'm free. Anyway, so yes, she let me do it, and I stayed. I started I have to write it down with the date I started. I started on series 3, October the 29th, 1973, and I continued doing Zippy right the way through till it finished, and Rainbow was no longer, being made on television. So it was over 20 years. So it was a fantastic job. But so that's how I started. I think after the interview, I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks before I started, and then I went along, and I made terrible mistakes as well. I remember after one of the early shows, the credits used to go up, and it was at the window, and the puppets were sort of dancing, and I thought, oh well, that's right, the credits are going now. And I stood up and said, was that okay? And they went, oh, cut! You can't have me showing. So they had to run luckily it was only the credits. They rerun. That wasn't difficult to do, but I remember things like that. And I always, I think like anybody who's a performer, some performances you think, oh, that's really good. And other times you think, oh, I could have done better than that. So, but it's a wonderful learning curve. And one thing with television puppetry is you're actually watching a monitor. And you're watching what you're doing with the puppets. So you're sort of seeing what the audience sees. When you're doing a puppet, normally you're looking up, watching the puppet up, then you have a totally different view of what the audience sees of that puppet. You're hoping that it sees it at its best. But anyway, it was quite interesting to do it that way. But yeah, no, it's a wonderful time, and I'm still doing bits of Zippy now. It's amazing. Just the other weekend I was on Dancing on Ice, with George, Bungle, and Zippy. We did a tiny little excerpt, if you like, as part of the program, introduced one of the competitions, I think, or something. But my goodness, here we go. This is sort of years after the program finished. So they're still very much loved, and all the characters on the program. And so, it's very nice to, I'm still fit enough to do it all. So that's good. and may it long, carry on lasting. I love it, and it's very nice having fans and people saying, I go to do comic cons and various things like that, and people come along and say, "Oh my goodness, you were my childhood," and blah blah blah, and it is lovely. And then I had the book in 2019. I was asked by the two authors, Duncan and Nuala, to say, "Ronnie, would you be interested in having a biography, of your work?" And I thought, well, that's very nice, but I don't know who will buy it. Nobody knows me. And they would say, but they do know Zippy. Yeah. And so that was the thing. And the book was published in 2019. It's just been remaindered now, sadly, but there are copies available on Amazon and all, those sort of eBay and stuff. So, sometimes people, I don't. The book was cost when it originally came out because it's only paperback, but it's quite a few pages. And it originally cost $10.99. Well, I bought some of the copies from the warehouse, when they remaindered it, and I sell it for a tenner because I think it's 99p. I don't want to do that, but I'm gradually running out of those now. But anyway, I still have a few left because I've got a few comic cons coming up, and I take them along to sell, which is quite nice. But there we go.
When you're being Zippy or George or on radio, so is it uncomfortable because you look like you must be really cramped underneath that sort of counter thing?
Yeah,
excruciating to sort of be under there.
It is quite. It's not too bad. We've got very low chairs. I'm just going to see if I can show you again. So I keep using this book because it's got pictures of stuff, but it does give you an idea. That's Malcolm, who took over from George. Now, see that he's sitting on a very low chair. There's a couple of cushions. It's a wheelie. It's got wheels underneath so we can move about. I'm doing Zippy, but not in the shot there, but you can see it's the studio. And that's the sort of things we used to sit on under the table, so that they were only about sort of, 4 inches, whatever the width of those wheels are, up from the ground. So we were quite low, and we'd put our hands up. It was sometimes a bit of an arm ache, but it's quite interesting. With Zippy, I could sort of have him there, and when we were off shot, I usually put my hand under his chin and so it saved my arm a bit. And then, I sort of did it that way. And because we could see when shots were coming up, and because we'd obviously read the scripts and we'd rehearsed a bit, we knew when they were going to cut to the puppets, or if it was Zippy, Bungle and George together, we'd be active, so they wouldn't suddenly go, come alive or anything. But it can be quite uncomfortable. Funny enough, we sort of, over the years, we managed to get, I got cushions put in and things like to make it a bit more, and it's sometimes a bit of a backache because you've got the sort of chair that has a back to it, but it's quite, it's quite a strain being under there. And then you don't realize you're in any sort of strain until you sort of finish the scene, and after you say, oh, blimey, I want to stand up, that sort of thing. But Puppeteer's life is a little bit like that because you're always either crouching under something. The worst things is when we were in the garden scenes behind the wall, if you remember that, and sometimes just flats when there isn't any room for your legs. You can imagine you've got the puppeteers, you're sitting on these chairs and you've got your legs sticking out. What do you do with them? And I'm sort of fairly tall, sort of 6 foot. And it was like, and that was quite crippling. But basically, we enjoyed doing it so much that we forgot about some of the strains of the body pain that we did. We went, we acted through all that. No, I'm sort of joking, but occasionally, yes, it could be difficult, but it wasn't always. And we did try to make sure remedy, things, to make things a little bit easier for us. Yeah. And because we told directors and people, they said, look, we can't be under here for too long because this is really too much, and they took notice of what we said and were very, were quite helpful and, at times. So, and then some designers would build different sort of heights for us. And there was a counter we had at the other side of this, and that was a better height for us because it was built slightly higher, and we could stretch it and we could sit more comfortably, so that we didn't mind being at the counter so much. I mean, I quite like being at the window. It was always a bit of a strain because if you can imagine, we had the puppets up here, but the monitor we watched was over here, so we had a bit of a neck ache, and so we were doing the puppet like this, looking the wrong way, which was quite interesting. But it's just that's the way it was. But that was nice because the window framed us a bit, so we were sort of framed in that, and so you could, you sort of got the moves as much as you could, really succinct and well from doing that.
So I know you said that there's a monitor so you could see what the camera was seeing, what
Yeah.
the video was saying. And was there a separate monitor so you could see what Roy was doing as well? So you could anticipate what he was...
No, that's interesting you say that. No, we just listened. I think puppeteers always develop huge ears, although mine is quite small. No, but you listen to and there were certain things that Roy used to do before sometimes Zippy spoke. He would go, and I knew that he was going to speak, to me. And so I could almost preempt what he was saying. And over the years, we got to know each other so well that you just almost did it automatically. You knew that the dialogue would go, and you think, oh, Zippy's going to say something here, even if you didn't know the script that well. You knew he was going to interrupt and be rude or something. And then George was the slower, quieter one. Oh yes, he will do. And so it was very, it was a little bit different, but perfect foil for Zippy. I mean, Zippy being this awful know-all and loudmouth, George was, oh, Zippy, you shouldn't do that, and all that. And it was quite nice. And oh, George. And same with Bungle. I mean, Bungle irritated him like mad, and so he'd say, oh, Bungle, Bungle Bonts, he'd call him all sorts of names and stuff. So, it was great. And because we all got on so well, I think the characters developed over the years, and I think that made the program more lasting, really, because I think people loved the way the characters were developing, and Zippy was getting even more noise, and then when they zipped him up when he was too much, which was lovely.
Do you think Zippy was misunderstood in many ways?
Yes. Yeah, he's probably AHD, or whatever you call it. Well, ADHD, he just couldn't stop talking all the time. But no, was he misunderstood? Yes, sometimes. But I don't know whether he loved the sound of his own voice. I don't think it was that so much. I just think he thought he knew, passionately about everything. And, he was only, he was supposed to be only so old. He was sort of this strange character, which people always said, what was Zippy? What is he? And we used to say, well, and then Roy and I, we'd get together, so many fans would write in the office, would come down and say, look, these people are asking, what is Zippy? And they didn't know. So we say, well, basically, he's unique. And so we used to sort of put in brackets, Zippy is unique. And that's how we left it. But I think it's quite good, really. He was, really. There wasn't anything really like him, and nothing really has sort of gone on to be like him on, anywhere. So he is definitely a unique character. But yeah.
So how did filming sort of work? Can you just take us through a day? So
yeah.
Did you get scripts beforehand, and did you come in to rehearse and?
Yeah, basically we had a read through, which is we used to record 3 programs a week, and so and we'd have different directors each week. So where there was probably about 5 directors on the program. One of them would come in on the Friday morning, say, and I'd get up to Teddington. We would rehearse in the Yacht Club. It sounds terribly grand. I think it's actually grander now. I think it's all had a reverb. But when we were there, it was a little bit, not seedy, but, a little bit. But anyway, we're upstairs in their sort of main meeting room. And so we had tables, and we sat there, had 3 scripts, and we read 3 scripts. Well, basically, I didn't have to read it. I mean, Roy was there, Geoffrey, the director, the producer, and the PA who was timing everything to make sure that everything was kept in the right time. And we'd read through, and then the scripts originally were written by a man called John Kershaw, and he must have written hundreds of scripts before eventually the cast started writing the scripts. But anyway, getting back to the daily routine, we'd go on a Friday morning and we'd read through these 3 scripts, and they'd time them, and they say, I think we'll have to cut down, this one is a little bit too long. And so we'd, decide it was a sort of more or less a collaborative thing. I mean, with the director, I think we'll cut that scene, I think, because this scene seems a much nicer, funnier scene to do. And so that sort of thing. So we'd make sure they're all timed correctly. And then the producer and the PA would go away. This would say the first hour or so. And then we sort of plot everything, basically a bit like you do an actor. You'd say, well, you will have that scene in the window with the puppets. We'll have this one at the table with the puppets or whatever. And then we've got the counter over there, so we'll use that. But we didn't have the actual sets there. We just sat in chairs and lifted up the puppets, and we didn't have a monitor to see anything. So sometimes we had the script on our laps, and just to sort of, so we knew, and we'd listened, and we'd make notes. There'd be a tea break or something in between each program, so we'd sort of write down, now Zippy's over at the window for this scene, so we sort of knew where we were. And then the weekends, everybody went away to learn the scripts. Roy luckily didn't have to learn it because he had his scripts, and we didn't really, because we just listened. I mean, I read it a few times, made sure that I knew what was going on. And then, but Geoffrey and Bungle had to learn their lines. And then on Monday, usually Monday afternoon, we'd come in, say at 2:00 or something, and spend the rest of about, I suppose we'd sometimes finish at 5 or something like that, 2 till 5. And we'd rehearse with, hopefully Geoffrey and Bungle would know their scripts, and Roy would come in, and we would just rehearse it a bit more, maybe think up some ideas, maybe change something a little bit here and there. Yeah. And then on Tuesday morning, we'd come in and we'd maybe go through the whole thing a little bit again, but then we'd ask the producer and PA to come over, and they do a final timing to make sure, and it was called like the producer's run on a Tuesday, so she could sit there and say, well, I don't think what you're doing there is very good. It's not Rainbow, it's more like Pipkins. No, I mean, it wasn't like that. She would never say that. But it was, so they might be, we might have overran a bit, we might have extended a scene a little bit, and, she thought, and then we had an educational advisor who made sure that all the sort of educational elements, because it was basically a preschool program, and there are things like we never could use scissors. We had to have round nose scissors, and they're usually the plastic ones you could hardly cut anything with. But anyway, we had to use those. No glass, obviously no knives or anything like that, So it was all very carefully constructed so that all the sort of make and do's, a bit like Blue Peter, were done so that it was possible that the kids could do it possibly with the help of their mum or their carer or whatever. But that was the thing. But there was no sort of things with the glue and things, that we couldn't use glue that stank and they could get sort of hallucinate or something. It was always things like I think we had that white glue, what was it we used to use, sometimes those sticker things you could sort of strike across and stick things on, but it was all very very and sellotape, anything to do with sticky tape. We couldn't say sellotape, that was a brand, it's so funny really. But anyway, those sort of things. So and they were all, they had to be worked out with Geoffrey how he was going to do. He did most of the making. Bungle would help him a bit, because that was in a way why Bungle was there. He was handing over stuff to, the puppets were there to comment on things, or if they helped a bit, sometimes they painted something. But and then the Wednesday and Thursday were the days in the studio, so we'd get I'd go up in time for breakfast at the canteen at Thames Studios then, and then we'd start. I think I'd get back down into the studio. The studio was Studio 3, the smallest studio in the Thames complex. It was quite sweet really, and it was just room for 3 cameras and the set and us really. We had a tiny green room which was just off, and then there was a control room which was another room off, but with the glass things so they could see through, although they looked at monitors most of the time. We'd just go through the programs. We'd have camera rehearsals usually in the mornings, and we'd record 2 programs on Wednesday, so it's quite a long day. I probably wouldn't get home. I think I got home around about 8 o'clock, something like that, in the evening. So it was quite a long time studio days. But we obviously had lunch hours and there was the odd tea break, and especially when the singers had a big number, maybe lots of different costumes, there'd be a break for us then, and we'd have some tea or something like that. Or I'd wander around the studio to see what was going on, because it was always quite fun to see all the big productions, because in those days there was big things like the Morecambe and Wise show was being done, Benny Hill was being done. In Studio 2 there was all sorts of things like Give Us a Clue and other programs, Tomorrow People, all sorts of stuff was being done at Thames. It was probably one of the biggest ITV studios in its day. There was so much going on. And of course, lunch hours were always great fun, because you'd go up to either the canteen or to the restaurant. Sometimes we'd go to the restaurant. It was slightly posher. You had waitress service in the restaurant canteen. Of course, you just took your own food. But surprisingly enough, you went to the canteen, quite a few of the well-known personalities would come and sit and eat, their food from there. I remember there was a wonderful series about Edward the Seventh, or whatever it was, the one who abdicated. And there was a wonderful old actress who was famous. Her name was Jessie Matthews. And she was a singer and a dancer in the 30s and 40s. Anyway, she was getting on a bit. She had played an aunt, I think, to Mrs. Simpson. It was Edward and Mrs. Simpson was the series. And it was a big budget thing, beautiful sets and Studio One. Anyway, Jessie Matthews would be sitting, and I'd sometimes sit next to her and eat. And she was lovely to chat. I said, I know I didn't see you in your heyday, but I think I've seen your movies on telly. And it was lovely talking to these lovely people like that. And of course, we had wonderful guests on Rainbow as well. We had all sorts of wonderful people. I can name a few because I wrote them down. Pat Coombs, who was a wonderful, wonderful comedian. She worked with so many of the big comedians over the years. Patsy Rowlands was another one. She was our auntie. They were both aunties that would come and visit and read a story. Ernie Wise, we were so lucky after Eric Morecambe died. Yeah. He came in and did a wonderful show, which is, I think it's still on YouTube actually, which was Zippy trying to tell a joke, and Ernie would come up to him and say, now, this is how you tell a joke, and all that, and that, it was wonderful. I mean, Roy was in his element because he to work with, and we had, the whole of the children's department were terribly excited to get Ernie Wise to be on Rainbow. I remember we went to the executive sort of luncheon area, which was private to all the sort of chairman and all that would eat in there. We took, we all had lunch with Ernie there. It was madness, isn't it? But wonderful. Judi Dench came in. Who else have I got here? Julian Glover, Beryl Reid. I mean, all sorts of well-known people of the day came in to read a story for Rainbow, which was lovely. And because it was nice for us, we could meet them in the green room and sort of chat. And some of the actors, I didn't know them personally, but some had worked with them in rep, because it was good old, rep theatre and stuff like that, where they might have worked together. And, yes, I remember working this, blah, blah. And of course, they took one look at us and, who are we? Oh, you're the puppeteer. Oh, you do Zippy and all that sort of stuff. So it was lovely. Who else now then? I think that's all the names I've written down just for trying to, scratch my memory of different things. So that's the sort of how the week went. And then, of course, Friday, we'd start the whole thing again. And originally we had about 24 weeks or something like that of doing that. Yeah. It did get reduced once the other companies started producing their own preschool programs. We didn't have to make so many programs because we shared it with Hickory House Pipkins and Mr. Trimble and all the different shows that were being done by the other ITV companies. So we ended up probably towards the very end of, this is now coming up to the sort of early 90s, I think we did probably about 6 or 8 weeks maximum. So it was reduced eventually a bit, but just because of basically there were other companies doing their own and that they had to have a, time on the screen as well.
Yeah.
So,
So we get damaged at all? Did they have to get repaired?
Oh, yes. We had, over the years, we've had several Zippies. Not so many Georges. It's quite interesting. I think Zippy, because he's toweling, I've got a little one here, which I usually show. Here he is. Oops. Oh, let's get him in shot. Hello, it's Zippy here. He was on the programme as well. Now you can, if I show him closer, you can see he's all toweling and stuff. This one's lovely because he's got legs, which is quite sweet. Because everyone, it's very funny. People say, we never see Zippy's legs. And Zippy always used to say, I choose not to show them. So that was his reaction to that. But then occasionally he did, and I thought, and his tummy as well, I quite like. So he just used to waddle along. I had little nylon strings on those, so I can wave those a little bit. But you can see the toweling. I mean, he's lasted quite well actually. But over the years, the bigger ones would get a bit grubby and dusty and all that sort of stuff. So what happened was we had John Thurtle, who was, as I say, he made the Zippy and Georges right from the start. Well, not the very beginning, but when he started the programme, they redesigned stuff. I mean, if you remember at the very beginning, it was a different presenter, David Cook, and he left after the first series. Also, a lovely actor called John Leeson, who's well known for playing K9 on Doctor Who. So a lot of Doctor Who connections. Roy used to do the voices of the Daleks and did some other sort of character work. And so did Peter Hawkins. So I think there's a lot of Doctor Who connection. Anyway, John Leeson left, but his original Bungle was a smaller head with quite starey eyes and a bit horrific, really, if you look at some of the very early ones. And he's ever so sweet. I met him at one of these Comic Cons, and I hadn't met him at all, I'd known about him for years. And he was absolutely charming, lovely man. And he does the odd Comic Cons, mostly talking probably about his Doctor Who things, but he does mention that he was the Bungle. But he said he always wondered, after the program went out, when he saw this sort of head, he thought, would kids get terrified of this sort of monstrous bear? And I don't know whether they did, but he himself thought, my goodness, but he can do nothing. It was a job. He's a jobbing actor. This is the thing. But they did change it into the sort of Bungle head that was a little less, a bit more like a teddy bear. Yes. So, very interesting, the development of how things changed over the years.
How did, I don't know if you know this, but how did they clean the Bungle suit as well? Because, I mean, you're under studio lights all the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, the Bungle suit is a sort of nylon fur. Yeah. And that could be, the head was the one that difficult, because it was sort of like a plastic covered with the fur, and the eyes, it was very clever. He had a cap inside the head so that it just came, the Bungle's eyes came to where, the actor's eyes were. It was quite clever. And then the mouth, he had a chin piece to the mouth. So it sort of moved where he moved his chin. Right. But the head was sort of, I suppose, I don't know, sprayed or something. I don't know how they clean the head. But the costume could be put into a washing machine, the actual fur. Yeah. But underneath, because Stanley or Malcolm, whoever played Bungle, had a sort of what we call a tutu. I mean, it was that sort of gauzy to make him look fatter, rounder. Right. And same, it went right. It literally, he put it on like it had legs, and then it came up, and his arms. So the arms were a bit sort of thicker looking, and that was always put into the. That was dry cleaned and I think same with this. Actually, I'm sure it was dry cleaned. The fur wouldn't have gone in the washing machine. I'm sure it wouldn't have lasted. And sadly, with Zippy and George wasn't so bad. His sort of fur didn't seem to attract the dust so much, but Zippy did. And so John Thurtle would remake, and we've had there must be over the years, there are probably about 10 Zippies and probably about 5 Georges all over the place. The Zippy you see behind me is one that a friend made for me for the cover of the book, because basically I have an old Zippy, but he really is showing his the towel. He's looking a bit rough, and his tongue was a bit sort of messy with stuff. And he was anyway. I brought him along to the publishers, for doing the photo for the book, and they said, "Oh, and I also had this newer one." And so they said, "Oh no, we'll have the new one. We don't want that old thing to sell the car." And they're all right, really. And I loved the way we asked if we could do it so that Zippy is covering my face, so it's all about Zippy, not me, which I liked. And they originally said, "Oh, we want a picture of you and Zippy next to you, smiling sweetly," and all that. And Duncan said, who was one of the authors, said, "Oh, I think it's not so much that Zippy wouldn't sit still for a photograph. He'd be, it's all about me, love, And that's what we did, and they did accept it in the end. And I like it for the cover. It's really good.
The Naughty Rainbow episode, you probably asked about this all the time. So the folklore version of the story is that it was a real episode and it somehow escaped out into the wild, but it wasn't quite like that, was it? This is the one with all the swearing. Well, it wasn't really swearing, was it? It was just
innuendo, schoolboy humour. Basically, what happened was, it was 1976, I think we did that, so a long time ago. And what it was, there was some recording time usually left on a Thursday. Sometimes 2 shows it took up all the time, but on a Thursday sometimes we'd finish with some time left over to do something, or whatever, or we could go home early or something like that. Anyway, the VTR people upstairs said, "Look, we've had this competition for years, internal competition, I quickly add, for all the sort of bloopers and all the things that go wrong from various programs, and we've collected quite a lot, and every year we have a competition, and we have a competition with the BBC as well, so it's a linked thing, and it's purely just sort of private, not for public viewing." Anyway, so we thought, oh well, we could do something, and Roy, Geoffrey, and I it wasn't actually, fun enough, people say, oh, it was Jane, Rod and Freddie that came, and it wasn't actually. It was Jane, Rod and Roger. Roger Walker was a singer. He took over after Matthew Corbett left. Anyway, so we got together, and over lunch hour we sort of wrote this silly, child thing. And Charles Warren, who was our producer then, said, "Look, there's no way that you can actually swear. We don't want any swearing from the characters. But if you do something, so Zippy would say, 1 skid, 2 skid, 3 skid, 4, oh," and then George would come in, "Oh, I've only got a little one," and all that. Now, what are we talking about? We're talking about bananas, but it's there's double meanings. And then with Geoffrey said, "Oh, I like playing with my balls," and he's chucking balls up in the air. Jane comes and said, "Oh, I've been playing with my knockers all night," which was these sort of hammer with wooden blocks in. All that sort of stuff. So it was done after a Thursday, and it was like 3 minutes, if that. It's a tiny little shot, but it was shot as though it was an absolute rainbow. How we got through it without giggling so much, I don't know, but we managed it. And of course, what was very nice, we actually won the competition that year. People thought that it was hilarious because it was just silly. And it could have been an actual rainbow. In fact, if it had gone out at the time, I mean, preschool kids would have thought, it's peeling a banana, sort of thing. I know I did a little naughty thing when George said he's only got some. We were at the counter, and George was saying, "They've only got a little one" or something. I'd suddenly go, I did a quick look down, but I remember doing that. But no, so basically we won it, and that was all great fun. We thought, oh, lovely, and thought nothing of it, and years went by. And then Channel 4 had a late night show for literally like midnight or something like that, 12:30. I can't remember what the name of the show was. And somebody had sent him a VHS tape. Somebody had, I think from maybe from Thames. I don't know. One of the cameramen, you know, they might have been freelance and said, look, why don't we show a bit of this? This would be a laugh. And they showed it on this Channel 4 late night program. And people absolutely thought it was hilarious and wonderful. And then it sort of died down a bit. And there wasn't too much sort of scandalous stuff going on. And then, of course, YouTube started. And once YouTube started, it was put out because people by that time had made copies, you know, and they're interesting when you see it, it's always quite a grainy copy because, you know, people took it off. They had old VHS, you know, recorders or whatever it was then. Yeah. Anyway, they took it and it was put on YouTube. Fremantle Media, who owned the brand, as it were, took it off immediately. Said, "Oh, we can't have this. This is disgusting." And then it was put on again, and then it was taken off, taken off, and eventually, in the end, I think they just said, "Oh well, you know, we're not going to win here." So, and it's been on, and is talked about. People do ask me, say, "What about the rude one, or what about the Twangers episode?" I think I know what you're talking about. And we used to use Twangers, that Twangers thing in the program because it was a cardboard box with an elastic band over it, and because Zippy only had the one hand, we could go doing, and it was twanging. So we, you know, they were our twangers. Of course, you know, it has other connotations, but you know, that was how it went. But that's the story of the rude rainbow, as people sometimes like to call it.
After the program finished, they carried on after a while, didn't you, to do nightclub?
Yeah, I mean, that was wonderful. All through the years, we kept saying to the powers that be upstairs, as it were, look, you know, there's so many fans. We keep getting all these fan letters. Why don't you produce stuff? And they did. They produced some puppets. They weren't terribly good at the very beginning. They did produce the annuals, the Rainbow Annuals. But then after it finished, I had a call. I remember having a call from, I think it was from Fremantle, saying they've got a company who wants to produce Christmas cards and birthday cards with the characters on. Do you have a set of characters? And I said, yes, I've still got the old ones from or a set. So we brought them along. We posed George and Zippy for their Christmas cards and birthday cards thing. That took off. I think one of the big card companies bought them, and they were sold for many years with those. And they even eventually had Roy doing the voices of Zippy and George. You know, you could press the thing and you could hear him say, "Happy birthday," you know, it would come out on the thing. And then they decided they go with T-shirts, and then the whole thing opened up. They had cut mugs, bags, purses. I mean, you name it, they just produced a lot, and it really took off. But while that was all happening, the music department of Fremantle said, look, a lot of these children's shows are doing what we call student union gigs now. It would be brilliant if Zippy and George could go, and maybe with Geoffrey and Bungle, and have their own sort of disco. And you could do like a 40-minute thing with Geoffrey dancing around and Bungle, and George and Zippy pretending to put records, and we'd have sort of 70s, 80s music. And we said, oh, yes, we'll be up for that, you know, see what happens. And they organised, literally, I think we went to nearly every university all over England, and we went to Scotland as well. And I think we probably did about 3 years worth of doing usually about 2 nights a week, maybe sometimes 3, you know, depending on the bookings. And we'd have a car that would pick me up and Malcolm, who was doing George at that point, and we did it live. Roy sadly had died by that time, and I'd taken over doing Zippy's voice, which was very sad, but we did all that. And so we did it live, you know, oh yes, hello Oxford, or whatever it was. And they built us a booth, and there was a gauze thing. We didn't have monitors or anything, but we could see the shadow of them behind. And we did things like It's Raining Men was one of the songs, and Zippy had a big water pistol and squirted water all over the students. I mean, we never started the shows till about, I would think, about 11:30 at night or something like that, because they were well tanked, if that's the right word. And it was like I think the nearest I would think it was like a sort of pop concert or something. They were all standing, you know, and there was sort of barriers between us and them. and we were up in this, but it was just amazing, the reaction. We'd bring them up with their backs turned, and we'd turn round, and the cheers of the audience would go mad, and click, 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 click with their mobile phones, because they had mobile phones then. And, you know, it was just extraordinary. It was lovely. And we had this sort of set, which was pre-recorded music. We pretended to put the records on, and then we'd dance away and sing away, you know. And we used to come up with, I think it was, you know, that's entertainment or whatever it was, you know, and we'd sort of sing, you know, madness. But it was great fun. And we had, sorry, I'm going to do a naughty thing again. In the book, I do talk a bit about some of the student gigs and some of the funny audience moments, because we used to have to, because they had T-shirts, and they sold merchandise, you know, at the event as well. That was one of their big things. Some people wanted us to sign stuff, so we couldn't get away. I mean, we might finish, say, at 1 or 2 in the morning or something, and then the car would be waiting for us to be taken back to wherever we live. But there'd be queues of people wanting to have signatures, so we'd have to do that as well. So yeah, it was quite a thing. The very first one we did was at the old Lyric Hammersmith. No, Lyric. What do they call it? It was not the Lyric. It was the Hammersmith Palais, which I think has been knocked down. But it used to be like a dance place with lots of disco stuff going on. Yeah. And that was the first one. They decided, let's just do a pre-one just to see whether it's going to work or not. And it was a school days thing, which is, there's a company that does, students go back to and dress up in their old school uniforms, and they dance, and there's a headmaster that's like the AD who chats. And anyway, there was a birthday. It was their birthday. They'd had so many years of doing these gigs, and we were at the Hammersmith Palais, and on stage there was this big birthday cake, and out sprung Geoffrey and Bungle, and also Zippy and George appeared at the top. It was boiling hot, hardly any dressing rooms. I mean, it was pretty unbelievable. You could hardly hear, but they absolutely adored it. And I think Thames or somebody rather filmed that, you know, that gig. And so they thought, this is going to go down very well with, you know, students. And it certainly did. And we did do, you know, a few years of those gigs. So that was the start of all that. And then merchandise is still being made now. I mean, the nostalgia thing has not really stopped. I suppose if you Google Rainbow, I think you'll find that there's mugs and T-shirts still. And I was talking to another company who's sort of taken over the brand of Rainbow now, which is a company called Boat Rocker. And the lady was telling me that they are producing, even there are some companies, I can't remember what they're producing, but something else is being produced with the Rainbow thing on. So they're quite...
I think I've seen some jigsaw puzzles.
Oh, right. Yeah. There you are. That might be... Yeah, there was jigsaw puzzles in the early days too. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that I can't keep up with it all. They really, it's amazing, really, the amount of stuff they do produce and sell, which as long as it's selling, they're very happy. Thank you very much.
Well, I mean, Rainbow's only a small part of your career, isn't it? I mean, you've done loads of things, you've massive movies as well.
Yeah, I've been very lucky.
Yeah, so Little Shop of Horrors, that was one.
Yes, Little Shop of Horrors, that was lovely. The original film I worked on was Labyrinth, which was the one that Jim Henson made. And I can be very naughty and show you a couple of pictures. I should have brought I didn't bring the film pictures with me.
I bought the book just for reference.
Oh, did you? Oh, good. Well, you know, you can see there's pictures of me sitting on Jareth's throne with one of the goblins. Looked a bit different then. It was a few years ago. I think it was bearded and all the rest of it. But anyway, and then there's one of the characters that who I played in the main song with the baby being thrown up in the air, which of course was Toby Froud, who now is I think he's 40 now, which is quite interesting. But
they did all the artwork for the puppets were based on, wasn't it? Because it was.
That's right. It was Brian Froud, his father, and Wendy Froud, his mum. They all worked on. Well, it was probably Brian's designs, and Wendy helped with the creation of all the characters as well. Yeah. And beautiful, amazing stuff. They worked previously on the film The Dark Crystal, and that was when they first met met up with Jim Henson. And of course, Jim loved working in England. He loved the Elstree studios, and he'd made Dark Crystal there, made another Muppet, an earlier Muppet movie there. And so he went and got Labyrinth. And the fact that Labyrinth turned up was the fact that he'd really wanted to do something, push the limits for something different. I mean, he was obviously well known for all the Muppet characters, but he wanted to do something, you know, totally original. He was very much that sort of person. And sadly, and same with Dark Crystal, when it first came out, people thought, oh, that's not Muppet. Oh dear, that's a bit weird. And it didn't really take off until they brought out, in those days, the VHSs, you know, for home viewing, and people bought them and they saw much more in it then. And now it's very much a cult classic. Same with Labyrinth. We've had conventions now. There's people that we had not all that long ago, Dark Crystal, that was an anniversary. I can't remember how many years it is, but it's got to be maybe 30 something years since it was done. And we brought, we went to Elstree Studios where it's all made, but we were in their sort of rehearsal room. It's quite a big room. And we had guests from the Muppet era. Dave Goltz and Steve Whitmire came over from America, Louise Gold, all these lovely people that had worked on the Muppets. And there was more younger puppeteers. I was invited there. And it was lovely to meet everybody. And we had, there was sort of a disco in the evening and people were dancing. But I worked on the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, which was the Netflix series, which was done not all that long ago. And it won an award, you know, one of the best, you know, got a good award. But sadly, Netflix decided that they had paid a lot of money for the first series and wouldn't pay for a second series because there's another story that could be developed. But sadly, they pulled out. They didn't want to know, which, you know, and lots of fans went, oh, we can't bear it, you know, but that's, I'm afraid these companies are in it for money, really, and all that. And, you know, sort of sad, but there you are. But yes, Little Shop of Horrors was wonderful to do. That came after Labyrinth, and that was I did some what you call vines at the bottom of the plant, and they grabbed hold of people, and think it was me and the whole, I mean, there was about 40 of us, you know, at one time in some of the songs and some of the big moments. I did Mushnik's legs when he was being eaten by the plant. There's a moment where he's walking backwards to the plant and he turns around, and then they cut to forgotten his name, the young guy, Rick Moranis, you know, and he looks like that, and then you cut and he's already been eaten, and it's just his legs sticking out, and they were sort of animatronic things. We were on rods, and somebody was pulling them in, and I was making the kick a bit. That was that bit. But another bit I loved doing was the bit with a vine, was that I did the dialing of the phone at the very end. The plant is totally alive and, you know, obviously can talk, and he's looking through the window and he can see Audrey in her flat across the way, and he decides to pick up the phone and dial and call her over. And so he picks up the phone, and then there's a close-up of this finger going zzz, zzz, and that's me. It's only about 5 seconds, if that. And then, you know, he comes over and she goes, well, that, I loved doing that. But I love that movie. I thought it was an amazing movie, and it's now been basically the ending was changed slightly because the original audience went, oh, you can't kill Audrey and Rick, you know, Seymour. It was Audrey and Seymour, wasn't it? And so the original ending was that the plant takes over whole of New York and knocks down all the, it's a bit like an earthquake happening, but this plant is making all the buildings fall and bricks are falling. And I think there is a version you can buy, the director's cut now, Frank Oz's cut, which has got that restored now into the mix, as it were. So that was quite interesting to see. But I had to leave a little bit early on that film because, pardon me, I had to get back to Rainbow, because Rainbow was, you know, I'd been not under contract with them, but I just wanted to carry on. You know, that was my permanent job, and these were just the fun jobs in between the breaks from Rainbow, because we always had summer off and we always had Christmas off. So it meant I could still either work and do a film job if it came along, or I'd work at the Little Angel Theatre, the puppet theatre, and do seasons there. So John Wright sort of didn't think I was letting him down every time when I was, selling my soul to the film, the television,
Yeah.
But I didn't quite. I was very, very active doing that sort of work. But what other films? Oh, recently I worked on, I did a tiny bit of, I don't know what you call it, but I had a marionette in the Beauty and the Beast remake of the live action version. And I played Lumiere doing little bits, but it was a marionette where they stuck candles on my head and candles in his hands. And it was like, so that the actors could see something moving as well, rather than just, normally, if it's a CGI type character, you just have a cardboard cutout and they have to act and everything to that. And so I did a few scenes where I was doing that. Be My Guest, for instance, they had the puppet pulling the tablecloth off in that wonderful song. And so we set that up so the CGI people could see. I think one of the things that was difficult for them in that particular film was the flickering of the candlelight, to get that right on however they do CGI. So it was quite useful to have a lighting. I had sort of wires, or not. I mean, if this is Lumiere, and his candle, there was wires going down the back and going up his sleeve and onto his hand. And the lighting people could, change the brightness and the flicker of the thing. Very clever. And I was just working the puppet for that. So I did that. And then a few years later, I got a phone call from a production manager for the next Disney film. And they said, hello, this is, I can't remember his name, terrible. Anyway, we loved what you did on, it's Beauty and the Beast. We've got another film. They wouldn't say what it was, but, would you be free? And I said, oh, yes, I think so. And this is very shortly after COVID. So, I mean, I had nothing booked because COVID was like 2 years of nothing.
Yeah.
And it turned out that I was employed from about the end of February till the beginning of April on the film Pinocchio, which was Tom Hanks playing Geppetto. And I was playing Pinocchio, the puppet. But I did only one scene with Tom because Tom only had 9 days on the film to do all his Geppetto bits. And so I basically, they made a puppet, was made in New York or somewhere, sent over, I strung it. It was costumed over at Pinewood Studios or something. We filmed it. Where did we film it? I've forgotten now. Isn't it dreadful? It's gone out of my head. Where did we film it? No, it's gone. It'll come back to me as I'm talking about it. But it was beautiful. I think it might. Was it Shepperton? No, I think. Oh, anyway, don't worry. Can't remember. And it was really exciting. He came over and I had to train. There was they didn't think there was enough female characters in the original film, so they had a ballerina actress, and she was a young singer actress, and I had to train her to pretend to be able to work a puppet well. So that was one of my jobs, as well as sort of stringing some of the other puppets that were hanging up in the background and stuff like that. But I had a lovely time. I know where it was. It was somewhere near St Albans, a great big aircraft. It was not an aircraft hangar. It was those what are they called? Airship hangar thing, and they made them in the 30s. And of course, this one had a terrible accident and it all crashed. So these hangars were sort of left of it. And I think film companies or a company produced this huge space, and it was ideal for putting sets. And so we went there. Is it Langley? Not Langley, somewhere. No, anyway, near St Albans, but in the middle of nowhere. Sorry?
Kings Langley, maybe?
Might be. It's awful, my brain. But it was lovely to work there. I mean, it's freezing cold, I remember. and lots of COVID restrictions. We'd arrive, they'd sent a car for me, and I'd arrive at the studio gates, or the gates of the place, and you'd have to have a temperature check, straight away. And if you had a temperature, you weren't allowed in anywhere near the place. Even if you were contracted, that's it. And then when you did get in, even if if your temperature was, you had a COVID test literally every day. So that was your first thing. You go to the little place where they had the COVID testers, and you did that, and that was fine. And then at the weekend, at the Friday, you had you had one where they sent it off a more sort of serious COVID test to make sure that you were, you hadn't contact. Or anyway, that was the way it was. And lunches, we had screens in front. We had goggles. We had to wear masks all the time. I had gloves. I mean, it was when you're filming, of course, it was all right. You were all, everything was free because obviously they didn't want to see, that sort of stuff on set. But and everybody people were kept off set. There was restrictions of how many people could go on set so that we weren't too close together and stuff like that. But anyway, it was a great time. Tom Hanks was wonderful to work with, and he was a lovely man. I mean, I always thought he must be nice because he's great on talk shows and stuff, but he was absolutely charming. And then what else have I done? After Pinocchio, I did a lovely film which came out last year actually, which was a not really a children's film or family film. It was a psychological thriller called A Quiet Place Day One. And there's a whole group of these films. There's A Quiet Place was the first one, and then there was A Quiet Place Day 2 or something, and then there's the prequel now, which is the one that we did, basically I played an old puppeteer working a marionette boy, and he blew up a balloon. It was a rubber tube going up. I mean, it was very cleverly made. I had a friend of mine who was a brilliant puppet maker, and the director said to me, this is a Zoom meeting I had, because they said, could you come to London? The director would like to talk to you possibly about appearing in this film. And I said, I'm terribly sorry, I'm in Norwich. I'm at Norwich Puppet Theatre doing a Christmas season. We've got 2 shows a day. I won't be able to, but I can do it in the evening from my digs. And that's what I did. I suddenly realised I've got no puppets to show him or anything like that. He'll just have to listen to me witter on. Anyway, he decided that I was the right person for the job. And then he said, now, do you know any puppet makers? I said, oh, yes, I know a couple, but there's one living in London, Peter O'Rourke, who's made most beautiful marionettes. And if I needed him to come on set, he'll be easier to use because we can, do that. And they agreed. And then the designer sent some designs. He sent stuff back and forth, and they produced this lovely boy puppet. And we filmed it. Fun enough, most of it was shot over here, actually. Although the story is based in New York. And the idea is that there was this time where this poor young actress, she was lovely, Lapida, and I've forgotten her surname. She's a wonderful actress. She was suffering from cancer, and she was in a hostel, not a hostel, what do you call it? A place where you go, you're dying. Sorry, a hospice, not hostel, excuse me. Anyway, and they had a day trip out to go into New York, and she said, oh, great, I'll go with you. She was rather bored with all the people she was with. She was quite young. Anyway, they travelled up to New York, and they went to this theatre, and outside it said, marionette show or puppet show. And I loved the reaction. She went, they're taking me to a puppet show. And I loved that. I thought that was hilarious. Anyway, they go in, and in fact, the bit that we filmed was actually filmed in Clapham Junction. There's an old theatre called the Grand, which is actually a music venue, really, nowadays. But they redesigned or played about with it a bit, and it was supposed to be like a Chinese theatre. So there was a load of audience in, and I walked on stage with this marionette and did this little boy. Well, I walked on with a suitcase, opened the suitcase, took the marionette out, did the act, blew up. I had a rubber tube in my mouth, a bit like that picture I showed you, blowing up this balloon, and it blew bigger and bigger. And then the boy floated up in the air and went across the stage. It was lovely to do. And we filmed it first for the audience point of view. So the cameras were on stage looking at the audience, and it was lovely. Some of the kids going, or people going, ooh, and it was really nice. And then they cut to me doing the puppet. And then sadly, the balloon, the boy is floating up in the air, and the balloon pops, and he falls down into the suitcase, and he looks up at me. And then they cut to Lapida going, oh, and then she goes out and she has memories of all sorts of stuff that's been in her. I mean, it's all sort of stuff that's happened in her life up till then, and then you carry on with the film. That was my little snippet, but it's very nice. There was only very few actors in the film, as it turned out. There's loads of extras, loads of people running in New York, and basically what happens is it's been overridden by monsters, these amazing creatures, but the only thing is they can hear very well, but they can't sort of see. But if you make a noise, they're there and they'll grab you and eat you or whatever it is they do. And so that was the thing. So the whole suspense was them creeping through this, rather, it ended up being quite deserted New York streets and things happening and falling and then hiding because something, they're going over. All done with CGI, very clever.
Mm.
But anyway, that was really lovely to do. So that was well, it came out last year, but I think I did it at the beginning of the year or the end of 2023 or something. So I was very lucky to have these films sort of suddenly coming about. But as I say, I do most of my work now. Oh, and of course I do these Christmas seasons at the Norwich Puppet Theatre. I've done those for the last 3 years now, which is great fun to do. Sort of pantomime. We did Sleeping Beauty last year, which is great. And this year, I'm not quite sure what they're planning, but they want me back again. I seem to be a bit regular. And then I'm going up there I think in this month, actually, later on this month, we're doing a sort of, what do they call it? It's getting money. It's sorry, I've forgotten what the word is. Sorry.
Is it a Kickstarter?
Yeah, like a Kickstarter. It's similar to that, but we're doing a show and they're going to put money towards, they'll give money, it's donated for the theatre. Anyway, whatever it is, it's, I've forgotten, sorry, my brain. And I've had a haircut and I think some of my brain's gone out. But so that's nice. So I'll be doing that one day. And then, as I say, I've got Comic Cons coming up and I've got some teaching to do, which is nice. And I have a student that comes once a month to learn marionetting, string puppets. So, yeah, I'm kept quite busy, really, which is quite nice.
Are there any puppets that you really wanted to operate but never got the chance? I remember, sorry if I'm going to ruin the story, but
No.
You had an incident with Kermit the Frog.
Oh, yes. I mean, I did do an arm of Kermit in one of the films for Steve Whitmire. I mean, like a very brief moment, and that was quite exciting. I mean, sort of, I don't know why I can't remember why I was chosen. Maybe there was nobody else free or something. I can't remember, but that was nice. But no, there isn't really. I mean, I've been very lucky. I've worked with most of all the well-known puppeteers, certainly in this country and some in America, and a lot with the Henson Company and the various films. We did Muppet Christmas Carol with Michael Caine. We did Muppet Treasure Island. I think it was Muppet Treasure Island. I did a tiny bit of Kermit's arm. I can't remember. I'm afraid it was a while ago. But I did. So, yeah, I've worked with and met quite a few of them, obviously, through those sort of jobs.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think, gosh, it's awful. I know I've done quite a few commercials. We've done some children in need things for BBC, which was lovely. We did 2 of those fairly recently. We did one where we were at the, what was it? The what's it called? The cooking program thing with the 2 guys and Master Chef, I think it was called. That's right. And Zippy and George were making some terrible, disgusting chocolate dessert or something. Right. And there was Mr. Blobby on it. There was Basil Brush. There was Dodge and Hacker from the BBC. I mean, great stuff. I've got, since, I mentioned earlier that there's a puppet guild that I was a member of. I'm now the president of the guild. I mean, I know these things happen. And we've got the 100th anniversary this year. So we've got some quite nice events. We've got an event in the Belgrade Theatre in Coventry coming up. We have our AGM in London, fun enough, in St Anne's Church, but it's a lovely church in Soho. And we're going to walk down and find the original place 100 years ago where the guild started. So I think it's Rupert Street or something. I can't remember the name of the street, but it's a few streets away. And we're going to pretend to put a blue plaque up there as though, that was the start. And I've got, I think, hopefully for the members, if he's free, we've got Basil Brush coming along to be interviewed, which would be hilarious. So, we've got lots of lovely things happening. So yeah, it's all still going on.
Well, it's been an amazing, I mean, again, you get told this all the time, but it's, part of my childhood and all that sort of thing. And it's brilliant just to have yourself and Zippy there. And Yeah, it's brilliant. It's been a really, really fascinating conversation. So thank you so much for doing this again. The second one, isn't it? Second interview. So
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
uh,
I've just got to try and cup it. I'm taking over. Oh, sorry, I'm wobbling about. He's a bit wobbly with this because I'm. Oh, I just look at that. Isn't that wonderful? I've knocked the camera over. I'm trying to be terribly clever with Zippy. I'm not doing very well. I'm going to get there quickly. Come on, Zippy, do your stuff. So, oh wait, oh there he is. Oh look, he's going to hide the big one. That's better. Now come out. Look into camera. That's it. Thank you very much, Sean. It's an honour and a blessing to be with you this morning.
Bye-bye, Zippy.
Oh, he said say goodbye, Zippy. Bye. There he is. And no, it's been fun. Thank you very much. I witter on for England, Scotland, Wales, and the world, but you can edit some of me out if I talk too much. But it is nice. Lovely. Thank you very much.